Hello, everyone. Hi, welcome to our talk today. I'm Morgan Davis. I'm on the Board of Governors here at the FCC. Thank you very much for joining us on today's conversation. I think this is a really exciting one. I admit I knew very little about Chinese coins and charms before I looked into this and spoke with the wonderful Lucy, who was able to share some comments and insights with me, not only about the coins and the charms, but as we'll discuss today, about her late husband, who sounds like a fascinating man, and I only wish that I could have met him because it sounds like he would have had a plethora of stories to tell about his time in Asia. Today we are going to learn a little bit about Dr. Burger, the man behind the collection and behind the coins, as you see with the books out front and as you will see on the presentation as well. We're first going to hear from his friend, William McDowell, who is going to tell us a little bit about him as a man. Then we will hear from Professor Alex Fang, who will show us some of the collection and tell us a little bit about what's going on with them, give us some nice examples, and hopefully then answer some questions as well. After both men speak a bit, we'll sit up front. I have some questions to kick us off, and then we'll also open up to all of you. You're welcome to think of any questions that you'd like to ask. So thank you again. Please continue eating. Enjoy your meal. And I will turn it over to William.
Dr. Werner Burger, born Munich, 1936, passed away in Hong Kong, 2021, arrived in Hong Kong, 1965, scholar, numismatist, author, gambler. I thought about saying risk taker, but actually gambler is a much better description. Don't please think of Dr. Burger in grey suits, though he had many. Think of him in the finest batik shirts in the summer months and in bright Pringle cashmere sweaters in the cool weather. Think of him entertaining glamorous guests in the Hyatt Hotel to see the Lunar New Year fireworks. Think of him at the chef's table with jackfruit juice and black rum and his twinkling smile. Lucy Burger. It was a marriage made in heaven. She was his doll, his mole, his other leg, the government. Without her, he readily admitted, none of this would have happened. They were soul partners. He had set his eyes firmly on her, and he won her in a game of high-stakes poker. Well, not quite. Lucy's father was the preeminent merchant importer of emeralds and diamonds in Japan in the 1960s and 1970s. And he did not welcome the idea of his elegant, beautiful, debutante socialite daughter eloping with a Bavarian, scholar or otherwise. Lucy was a very desirable piece of merchandise. Born in Kaohsiung, educated in Japan, she was fluent in Taiwanese, Mandarin, Japanese, and English, and the world was her oyster. To overcome this resistance, obstacle even, the young Werner Burger arranged the bank guarantees and the process for a very high-stakes equity game, in effect a game of poker, where he, Werner, was the power behind the throne. Lucy's father won, and he won Lucy. Not too shabby. There she is. Everybody, Lucy. By this time, the not yet Dr. Burger was well into his first personal gamble. The stake was 15 years of his life, and the prize was fame. His professors at Munich University threw glass after glass of icy water for his idea to make a study of Chinese coinage from Nurhaci to Yongjin. They said there was no material, no research, no available coins, no faculty, no professors, and no interest. Qing coins were too new. Now he submitted his thesis, was awarded a doctorate, and published his first book, the definitive then work, and he stepped into the limelight. And again, he upped the ante. Supported by his beautiful and capable Lucy, he now took 4 gambles. As before, the stake was his life, and the prize would be fame, this time fame on the world stage, if he won. The gambles were these: that the Qing dynasty imperial mint records, which could not be found, could not have been destroyed. Who would dare to destroy them? The second gamble was that he would be able to acquire every coin, every emperor, every year, every mint, from Nurhaci through to Xuantong, the last emperor, Puyi. The third gamble was that he would be able to assemble a library to support the collection. And the fourth was that he would be able and have the time before he died to complete the research, arrange the coins, and publish the book. In all these gambles, and each of these gambles, he enjoyed huge success. We can talk about this at question time. And he assembled the largest, most complete, most important collection of Qing dynasty cast coins, silver-backed banknotes, silver ingots, and other numismatic items. And he wrote the definitive work on Qing dynasty cash coins in 2 huge volumes. There is a copy over there. Michael has got one, which are, it is the definitive work, and it is likely to remain the definitive work for 50 or 100 years. A steal at $900 if anybody would like to buy one. A very purposeful, meticulous, talented scholar. Finally, the leading player on the world stage in the discipline for which he was told there was no material, no research, no faculty, no professors, no interest. And before all this took place, imagine the young Werner, aged in his probably mid-20s, in Malaysia, walking up a mountain with a pet monkey he'd adopted, which may well have saved his life in one hand, and food from the villagers for the monk who lived at the top's begging bowl in the other. A colorful man. Thank you all very much. I would like to say one thing as an announcement. Professor Alex Fang is going to follow me and say much more interesting things than I've said about the collection. The majority of Dr. Burger's collection was auctioned in Spinks very successfully about a month ago. And the catalogues are here for those people who would be interested to buy them are available here. 500 for one with a hard copy, a hard cover, and 300 for one with a soft. So they're probably quite interesting things to buy for people who are interested in flower money. They will be part of the sort of definitive work moving forward. So, gentlemen and ladies, thank you all very much. Morgan, thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. Next, I'm going to talk about the topic that the formidable Morgan has assigned me, purchasing power, how demand for Chinese coins and charms is on the rise. But first of all, thank you, FCC, for the wonderful gathering and nice food and company. And also, I would like to thank Lucy and William and also Michael for their moral support throughout. And also Olivier and also Marshall and others at Spink for their logistic support. So first of all, I will start by saying that if you look at the Chinese auction market, as this graph indicates, and China is the largest sharer of that particular market, followed by the US and then the United Kingdom. Okay, and this graph was generated from the numbers from 2021. And then, what is especially particular about the Chinese market is that it is not only very, very big, but also it's very resilient and robust. If you look at the jump here from 2020 to 2021, you see it wasn't that much affected by the pandemic. And so this is what is very special about the Chinese auction market. And therefore, if I may, we quote Olivier here, who is the CEO of Spink. He had the vision, he realized a long time ago that the future of the auction market would be with China, with Asia, and here in Hong Kong. And he not only said that, he did it because he relocated the headquarters from London, here that you see, to here, Hong Kong. And he was time again proved correct. And then, most recently, by this particular auction, which was held on the 13th of April for the prestigious Werner Burger collection of Chinese charms, as you can see on the slide. And then there is the particular moment, very, very extraordinary, record-setting moment, where this particular piece was sold for 336,000 Hong Kong dollars. This one is record-setting. It marked the highest realization ever for this particular type of charms, which I will explain a bit later on. And then, if you take a look at this one, this is also record-setting. It has set the second highest record for the open-work charms. Really, really remarkable if you think of that. And here is the star of the whole auction. Here you're looking at a set of 4 charms, a set of four different flowers. There you see the plum blossom, the orchid, the bamboo, and also the chrysanthemum, the 3 gentlemen flowers. And those 4 went for a total of 708,000 altogether. And therefore, we're looking at something that is really special. And so, what I'm going to do next is to briefly describe what these things are, and then I'm going to talk about where the values come from, what is behind that excitement for these wonderful objects. So, we are looking at charms. And charms, if you know this word, refer to anything that brings you good luck. And so, charms here is an abbreviation of coin charms. So we're looking at charms in the shape of coins. Okay, that is what we're talking about, as you can see here, with a coin, rounding shape with a square middle hole in there. And then, more than coins, these objects serve the functions of bringing good luck and fortune and driving away evil spirits. And so they are amuletic and talismanic in nature and in function. So we're looking at some of the common forms of these objects. The one in the middle is the most standard, is the canonical form, square hole, round shape, and then with character inscriptions. If you look at this one, you don't have the inscriptions, but you have the patterns. Over here, you don't have the square round hole, but you have a round hole there. And this one doesn't have a hole anymore. And here, the round outer rim is in a more stylized form. So we're looking at these objects. They look like coins, and they are lucky in terms of function. Now, what is especially extraordinary about these objects rests with the ways they convey the meaning. Let me give you this example. if you read Chinese, you're looking at 4 characters, 福, 寿, 双全, or say complete with the couplet of fortune and longevity, part of the Chinese tradition. And then, while that is explicitly said through the inscriptions, you also see the pattern here, which says exactly the same thing. How? If you look at this here, can you make out what it is? Yes, it is a bat. And a bat in Chinese pronunciation is fu, which is exactly the same as this character, fu, fortune. And then let's look at this one. Do you know what it is? Yes, we're looking at 2 peaches. And peaches, by this shape, they deliver the semantic meaning of longevity. And so that nicely corresponds to the show here, longevity. And then, 双, where is 双? 2 objects, that's the couplet, okay. And where's the 全? The 全, or the completeness, is indicated and nicely expressed by the round shape, complete, okay. So these objects are fantastic. And so if you look at this one, I'm not going to describe the whole thing, but then you don't have any inscriptions, but you only have patterns. And these patterns transmit the instant, transparent, auspicious meaning instantly to the wearer and to the owner of this particular object. So this is a rather abstract representation where you have right in the middle some of the key elements, luck wishing and evil suppressing. So you see the 4 basic traditional elements in Chinese culture, where you have mysticism, followed by Buddhism, Taoism, and also Confucianism. So these objects basically are designed firmly based on these 4 corners of Chinese culture. And then they extend further to the outside. So they extend into our daily objects and also some of the tokens we use, as I will show you later on. So we're talking about the dual dimension. That is, first of all, they convey the semantic meaning. That's one dimension. And second dimension is that they serve a practical function. This one is canonical standard, luck wishing. If you look at this one, it's evil suppressing, the other part of the function. And then for this one, it's an identity token, okay, used by the military or the cavalry, okay, to transmit messages. So this one indicates that he's got the authority to give the commands. And then for this one that we saw right at the beginning, it is really, really a decorative pendant. And here is an image showing how this would have been used. You see the jade disc here hanging from the belt, okay. This object would be used in a similar way. How did we know that? If you look at it, you have 2 dragons here nicely fronting each other, and then here, you have the 2 hanging poles there, and you see that very nice, appropriately presented sign or wearing there. So we know it has to be used that way, okay. And then we have a gaming tokens. Here is the beating horse, the beating of the horse, and the former coins medals keeper, Dr. Joe Cribb, wrote a very, very wonderful article about these objects. So I hope by now you know what these charms basically look like, what they are. And then throughout the history, we say charms are very old. They started more or less around the Han Dynasty, about 2,000 years ago. And then they sort of culminated here around the Ming and the Qing Dynasty before they dropped again, okay? And the Song Dynasty was also a very, very active player in terms of the manufacturing of such objects. So next, I'm going to talk about the elements that underlie their values. And for this one, I must refer back to Dr. Werner Burger. And what is most appropriate about him right here is that he is a long-standing member. His member number was 2209 there. And we know he was German. He established a milestone in the study of Qing cash coins, as William mentioned just now, 2 books, 40 years apart, and the second Qing cash, published in Hong Kong in 2016, is simply something that can never be surpassed, okay? He represents this monumental stage in terms of the research of these coins. And I was fortunate enough to be in possession of those 2 books. And then what he did there was to make use of a large collection, 100,000 selected from 2 million pieces, and he was able to piece them together, put them together according to the years of production over the nearly 300 years throughout the Qing Empire. So he was able to tell which piece belonged to which year, and that was phenomenal. Nobody before him could ever do that. Okay. And then he, at the same time, had this wonderful collection of charms. So you wonder, are they meaningful compared with his primary utmost attention on the official cash coins? Yes, there is something, okay? He was looking at something that was very, very important about charms. That is, charms represent the social significance and the social norm of dynastic China. So he published this article, which was eventually included in a volume published in Germany, and the cover of which you can see here on the slide. There he said, if you look at coins, they represent what is orthodoxical. There's nothing that you can do but obey every regulation. And so, if you look at these here from Dr. Werner Burger's collection, you see this pattern coin carved from ivory. It was done for presentation to the emperor. The emperor would say, okay, I like this design. And then this ivory trowel will be turned into a bronze piece, hand cut as the master coin. And then the master coin would be cast into trials for the emperor's approval. Emperors would say, yes, that's okay, go ahead with it. And then they would produce the mother coins, which would be used for mass production of the everyday average issuances of the same coin that you can see. Okay, so everything was regulated. But this did not apply to charms at all. So charms represented the free expression of people's wish. Very different from the coins. Okay. And therefore, in Dr. Werner Burger's collection, you will see that his collection was vast, so vast that you're able to identify very sufficient, adequate representations of different types of charms, such as this one, the open work. He was very, very good at that, such as the hanging plaques like this one, and also the standard canonical form. And that wouldn't have been possible without his extensive collection of the coin charms. So not only just the forms, but also his collection had this wonderful representation of the regional productions. And here we're looking at the regional productions produced in Canton by the Canton Mint. Okay. Before Dr. Werner Burger, the Canton Mint productions were only sporadic. You only came across them on an accidental basis, but this time he is the first systematic representation of the coins, of the charms produced by this particular mint. And therefore, these were appropriately marked in the catalog such that people realized the potential value, and every single piece from this particular group went at the auction. And then there's also the Yunnan mint, also a sufficient representation. There's also the Jiangsu mint, and as you can see, the Jiangsu mint is very different from the Yunnan mint. Okay, once you put them together as a group, from large collections such as Dr. Werner Burger's, you would be able to expect to see the internal connections and the mutual contextualization of each other by these pieces. So that would be obvious, okay? And then there's the Sichuan mint, the four gentlemen suite that I described at the beginning belonged to the Sichuan mint. And of course, these went at a really, really loud, in a loud voice. You also see a group of secret society tokens, as you can see here, and I'm quoting a page from Werner Burger's pocketbook that he carried with him for how many years, Lucy? 60 years, right? Wherever he went, he carried with him this pocketbook. And this one, very nicely describes, for example, if you look at the four characters here, it's nicely recorded, and these correspond to this particular piece. Very, very surprising when you look at the specimen and when you read his pocket-sized notebook. That's striking, okay? And so this is why we say comparison and contrast are the most important means in terms of the realization or the appreciation of the beauty of these. If you look at these two, this one is in Dr. Werner Burger's collection, and that one is a piece that is usually what you can see in the market. Only through comparison and contrasts can you realize that while they look the same, they're not exactly the same. How? The ordinary piece had these two elements here. There's a flying bat there, and this toad here somehow acquired two longish ears there, such that it looks like a rabbit. But in Dr. Werner Burger's specimen, these two elements are missing. What would this tell us? Judging by the quality, judging by the size, we conclude that this is really an earlier design, if not the earliest original design. But the additional features were added later on. And so this is duly pointed out in the catalog. And this one also went with a big bang, okay? People were interested in it. And then, this is the point I wish to make, without such a large collection, without the comparison and contrasts between the pieces that you see in the collection, you will not be able to spot these very important aesthetic features. And then, here's another example. In Dr. Burger's core collection, which is recorded in the big Qing cash book, he has two pieces made by the machine at the end of the Qing Empire as an attempt to revolutionize the traditional coin production through Western technology. And then Werner Burger commented, historically speaking, these represent a fruitfulness coalition between ancient procedure and modern technology. And then this information eventually fed into this specific piece, unnoticed in his charm collection. Very small, only 23 millimeters in size. And yet, because of his previous research, we were able to add in the catalog the comment that this piece is probably issued by the Canton Mint. Okay. And because of this appropriate indication that this small piece eventually went for 66,000 Hong Kong dollars. And it is a record-setting piece because it is the highest representation for a bronze charm of this small size. Very, very remarkable, okay? And so, in terms of the value factors of charms, we talk in terms of symbolic meanings, we talk about aesthetic features, and then we must bring out their social functions and their historical features and values. And all of these combined together define the eventual perceived value for these objects. And buyers are sophisticated nowadays, but they're not experts in these objects. So many of these significances would need to be spelled out for them. And this is important in order to initiate them into the world of these beautiful aesthetic objects. Okay, so here is a Werner Burger again, and here's the final example of this Eastern-Western union. And of course, this union is also very nicely represented, symbolized by this wonderful couple. Thank you, Lucy, for the opportunity. I enjoyed working with you on Dr. Werner's collection. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you guys so much for that. That was a wonderful introduction. We have microphones that are going around, so please feel free to ask some questions. I'll kick us off, but we'll hopefully get to answer all your questions as well. One of the things that I think is really interesting about this is the time frame in which Dr. Werner Burger started really looking at this, and the time that went into his collection, met a lot of hurdles given what was going on politically in China at the time. William, you touched on this. Maybe you can just clarify for us again when Dr. Burger came over here and kind of how that affected what he was looking at as far as what he was able to access.
I think Lucy probably knows better than I know exactly what year he decided that he was going to write the first definitive work on Qing Dynasty coins. Perhaps that was just a little bit before he met Lucy. I'm not sure. As to his determination, he was the most determined man. He left no stone unturned. He traveled all over China. And in the end, he bought coins which people, even today, didn't know exist. Mm-hmm. So he really, his collection is quite unusual, quite spectacular, cannot be repeated. And over the time frame, well, it's got to be 50 years, that's at least 50 years. So.
And maybe you could tell us a little bit more about the Qing dynasty, as far as what distinguishes the period that Dr. Burger was looking at with the charms that you pointed out and with the coins. What is different? Is there any distinguishing factors about that dynasty?
Yes, once you look at his collection of charms, it's almost instant that you realize that his primary focus was on this particular group, manufactured, produced during the Qing dynasty, in a very expected way, because his primary focus was on the Qing dynasty cash coins. And so it was only obvious that he wanted to have two comparable groups that are the same in terms of their chronological production, but they demonstrate different features and expressions. And when we come to the charms from the Qing dynasty, we know they are very, very different from the charms produced in earlier periods. if you take the Song dynasty, which was the second most active period when the charms got produced, you see that the Song dynasty pieces were typically very, very religious in nature,
Okay.
calling for divine power, superstitious power for protection. But then if you look at the Qing dynasty charms, they are very, very different. They are very personal. They are slogans, they are proclamations for good luck in the imperial exam, please give me more wealth, and I would like to have 5 children. So once you look at these, they are very, very obviously different. I hope this answered your question.
Yes, yes, please.
Morgan, I would like to go back to the first gamble, which not the first, the second gamble which Dr. Burger took, which is an extremely interesting gamble for a Bavarian with a not fluent, but speaking Chinese, but not fluent in Chinese, to take. And that was that the imperial records of the Qing dynasty must exist. And in his mind, he was absolutely clear that they must exist. He went with Lucy 16 years in a row saying they must exist. And they said, Dr. Burger, please believe us, they don't exist. And he said, they do exist. And then, in whatever year it was, Lucy received a telephone call saying, good news. And she traveled up to Beijing with her dear husband to go to see the first, or the Di Danganju, whatever that's called in Chinese.
Di Danguan.
Di Danganguan. I mean, the first, I don't know how to describe it. What is the right word? It's the archives, the first Bureau of Archives for the Qing dynasty. And they said, Dr. Burger, we've got good news for you. And he stood up and he said, you've wasted my time for 18 years. And what had happened was that the Archive Bureau did not have the kind of budget that the Forbidden City had. And when they did any alterations, it was just paint here or repair the taps. Mm-hmm. And then in that year, they'd been given a bit more money, and they thought, well, we'll have a look at, we'll try to redesign the reception area. Mm-hmm. So they had a go at the wall, knocked down the wall, and inside, from the floor to the ceiling, from both sides, were the Qing dynasty records, which had been presumably been put there by the eunuchs in 1911 or 1912, that sort of time, and had been walled in. So with that, after a very long and painful wait, Dr. Burger had what was necessary for him to date every year, every mint. Mm-hmm. So that was a huge gamble, and it was a very painful gamble, a bit like The Great Short, really, I mean, The Big Short, but at the end of the day, absolutely justified. And marvelous that it was somebody who was not Chinese who knew that these things existed. Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yep.
Yes.
So that's just a bit more of that story.
Great. Yes, I mean, I have more questions that I can ask, but I want to make sure that we have enough time for everyone, too. Does anyone have a question? Just please feel free to put up your hand. Yes? Oh, great. Thank you very much.
Hi, Edith Terry. Hi, Lucy. I have a question for Dr. Fung, which is, I find it very curious that the official mint is also striking these charms. So what's the story there? Was this sort of a, unregulated money-making venture?
That's a very, very good question. Because the officially produced charms constitute possibly the most desirable genre of Chinese coin charms. And Dr. Burger has a very, very good collection of these. And then very different from the other charms made in private mints or in other regional official mints. The central mints also produce charms, but according to strictly official ritual procedures. For example, there is a very common type that you see every now and then in the market. On the face of it, there is the standard reign title, such as Qianlong Tongbao, or the currency of the Qianlong Emperor. On the back, you have 4 characters, 天下太平, peace under heaven. Such a piece is regularly made when a new emperor ascended to the throne. And when the new emperor ascended to the throne, all of the worshipping palaces would be replaced with these newly cast charms to mark the ascension of the new emperor. So the pieces that were previously there would have to be removed. So when we look at this particular aspect, the Qing official coin charms also strictly follow a protocol in this sense that you don't see with other common coin charms. Thank you. Would this be satisfactory in terms of your expected understanding?
No, my question was really a bit more basic than that. I'm simply surprised that the official mints were also producing charms. It seems like, something you described it earlier as a free expression, as opposed to a highly regulated type of product. So why were the mints producing charms as well as coins?
Okay. In addition to the 天下太平that I described just now, some of the regional official mints also produced charms with auspicious inscriptions, but these were produced to mark, for example, the imperial birthday. On Kangxi's 60th birthday, for example, a large number of these were made throughout the country by all of the regional official mints, but they were produced to mark a specific official imperial occasion. And then some of the other types were also produced to mark the issuance of a new coin. And these are what we call the 开炉钱, or what we call the furnace protectors. They were regularly produced. So you may say that these also carry a lot of substantial free expression, but they were made to mark specific official regulated occasions, according to books. Thank you.
Great. Do we have any other questions? Yes, we have one right here.
I'm intrigued to whether you're privy to this information as to who the buyers were of these coins and whether they bought them for purely investment purposes, or was it because they were auspicious and they thought that it was going to bring them luck, prosperity. I'm just intrigued to sort of, they sold of great value, of course, and they're worth it, but sort of who those individuals were who invested in the coins.
Sorry, I sort of missed your question. So why they wanted to have such objects, or?
Well, who bought them in auction?
So just this last month.
Yes.
Who were the main buyers in the auction for them?
And what was the reason?
There are different types of buyers for these objects. Some are dealers, but with charms, primarily they're charm lovers. Charms are highly addictive. According to my own experience as a collector, my wife can testify this. When I was into charms, once I flew long distance from London all the way to the West Coast in the States to that part of the world. I didn't sleep at all. And the whole journey took me 64 hours, non-stop. I went there, I got the piece that I wanted to acquire, and I came straight back to London. So that's the sort of energy that a true charm lover expected to put into the collection of such pieces. So there is the genuine love of these objects because they're attractive, they're beautiful to look at, and also to handle. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Yes, another question? No.
I think my question slightly follows on from the first question. First of all, in your presentation, there was a brief bit that talked about something about the relationship between cash coins and charms and some sort of polarity of, I suppose, sort of Chinese values there. There was something that, unfortunately, it moved on quite quickly. I just wondered if you could expand on that, because to me it's quite interesting. I'm from the UK, and the idea that a coin is a charm, that's quite different, for example, from my own culture, where, yes, the mint will produce, as you mentioned, they might produce a coin for a coronation or a queen's birthday or something, but it's still a coin, it's still money, it's still worth £1 or 50p. The idea that money and luck, there was some reference, there's some kind of relationship to that in Chinese culture, or at least unless I misunderstood, and it's certainly different from my own culture. And I wondered if you could just slightly expand on that idea, because that's quite interesting from my point. Charms are coins and coins are charms. That's quite unusual as a European anyway. I wondered if you could expand on that idea.
Okay, thank you very much. That's a very sophisticated question. It's a question that I've been recently discussing with the curator of Chinese coins at the British Museum, Dr. Helen Wang. She has just staged this big China exhibition at the British Museum. So we were talking about this issue, and this issue is very important. Where's the boundary, or is there any boundary between a coin and a charm? This issue, Dr. Joe Cribb, the former keeper of coins and medals, the British, also talked about extensively. What we can see is that coins themselves are taken to possess that intrinsic function that is more than money very, very early on. And this was evidenced by the fact that if we excavate an early tomb from the Han Dynasty, as an example, there are you would expect to find a lot of standard cash coins in there. They were there not as money, but rather as something that is spiritual, that possesses that additional function that we normally don't think of when we look at coins in terms of money. So in the Chinese belief, the shape of the coin itself is amuletic. It is also talismanic. And also the fact that they're made of bronze, the metal itself in ancient mythology is also amuletic and talismanic. And therefore, this would underlie the intrinsic connection between coins and charms. And we can say that charms are simply the explicit extension of coins in terms of this particular function. Okay.
Excellent. Yes, another question in the back.
Thanks a lot for this presentation. The opening remarks were worth the price of admission alone. I note that these coins come from different mints around the country. You mentioned the Canton Mint, the Sichuan Mint, and so on. Is this analogous to the Federal Reserve System in the US, where there's regional central banks that are kind of overseen by a main central bank? I know that's not really the point of this talk, but I'm just curious if you could add to that at all.
This is a good question. We're now into the issue of the finance sector. I'm not an expert in this particular aspect, but Dr. Werner Burger definitely was. And yes, I think all of the regional mints were strictly watched and managed by the central government. And therefore, in terms of weight for the raw material, including the copper, including the lead, and also include the charcoal, everything was carefully measured and distributed to the regional governments. And if the regional government had any problem in terms of the transport of the metal, in terms of raw material, the government would step in and do things about that. And therefore, the regional governments and the regional mints were just extensions of the central government. And therefore, in terms of this particular respect, I think they were probably better or more strictly controlled than the other federal money issuance agencies or institutions. Thank you.
Great. I think, unfortunately, do we have one more question? No? Yes, sorry. Okay, last question we've got time for. Thank you.
Sorry for keep you here. Sorry for keeping you here. I've got a question about the coins and the charms. So since those charms were also coin, is there any record that those charms have been used actually as a monetary? So, for example, that if it's a provincial use for a trade of a specific type. How to reformulate it?
Can I come at this in a sort of slightly different way?
Yes.
And that is that money in China is money. It's a medium of exchange to buy this and that, as it is in any other society. But coins themselves and charms themselves, they are much more than that. They are a medium of goodwill. They are a medium of good guanxi. They are a medium of best wishes, a talisman. All these things together so that they have value, which is not actually a monetary value as such. But in China, guanxi, good relations, friends, are also hugely valuable. So that's a slightly different way of looking at it.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Well, I hate to cut us off, but we have run out of time. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you very much. This has been a fascinating talk. I'm sure if there's some additional questions, our speakers would love to talk to you all off stage and continue the conversation. We, of course, have the lovely Lucy around the FCC often, and I'm sure she would love to share stories and talk more as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank
Morgan.
you very much.
Thank
Thank
you,
you, Morgan. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.